Hi everyone, and welcome to Know Your Food with Wardee. I'm Wardee, a wife, mom of 3, and the lead teacher and founder of TraditionalCookingSchool.com. I'm also the author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Fermenting Foods. I'm so glad you're here. This is the podcast devoted to healthy family cooking with traditional methods like sourdough and old-fashioned pickling. These foods are delicious, easy, healthy, and your family will love them. If you haven't already, be sure to grab my free gift for you. It's 5 free traditional cooking videos from inside Traditional Cooking School that will introduce you to my favorite fundamental techniques of traditional cooking. To start watching now, just go to knowyourfoodpodcast.com/watch. And now let's get to today's episode. Hi everyone, and welcome to Know Your Food with Wardee. This is episode 151. Wow, we've surpassed 150. What a privilege it's been to visit with you. If you'd like links and more, the things I mentioned with this episode, go to knowyourfoodpodcast.com/151 for episode 151. If you're joining me live right now on Periscope, where I'm recording this podcast, welcome to you. If you're catching this replay later through iTunes or through the video replay at knowyourfoodpodcast.com, welcome to you as well. It's going to be fun. Last week, I introduced kitchen rules 1 through 5, and all week long since, they've just been coming to me. And since you all enjoyed the last episode 150 so much, I thought we should do it again. So let me explain what the kitchen rules are in case you missed 1 through 5. Well, here's the thing. I listened to a podcast completely unrelated to food, and the guy talks about, and he helps me with well, he doesn't help me, he helps so many people, but his particular focus is on email. And so I learn a lot about, how to do effective email with all the traditional cooking members and subscribers. And so he goes through these email rules, he calls them, and they're just ways to teach these principles about, credibility and integrity and being effective and all that. And I got to thinking, there's so much we can learn in the kitchen. So that's where the title, All I Really Need to Know I Learned in the Kitchen, came from, and this idea of sharing kitchen rules with you. So today we're on kitchen rules 6 through 10, so another 5 kitchen rules. I look forward to hearing from you if any of these resonate with you. And as I said, I'm recording this live on Periscope right now, so if you're in the live audience, you just feel free to keep the hearts flowing and the comments coming as I share rules 6 through 10. If you're listening to this later, the comments are open for you at the show notes, knowyourfoodpodcast.com/151. I would love for you to come by there and share your thoughts about any of these kitchen rules. And if you've missed 1 through 5 and want to catch up, that podcast is available for you at knowyourfoodpodcast.com/150. That was the part 1 of All I Really Need to Know I Learned in the Kitchen. Today we'll do part 2. So you guys ready? As I said, these have just been coming to me, and here I'll show you. I've been writing them down on whatever these are called, sticky notes, because I'm in the kitchen or the bathroom or whatever, and I just run out and I get my whatever this is called, sticky note pad, and I write it down. And so then I brought it with me today to make my notes for today's episode. And actually there's only 3 here. And one came to me last night when I was driving. I could not write it down, and I don't remember it today. Isn't that sad? I don't remember it. Maybe it'll come to me again. But as I was typing up these 3, preparing for today, 2 more came to me. So that's why we have 5 more today. Otherwise we were looking at just 3. Okay, so number 6, kitchen rules. All I really need to know I learned in the kitchen is actions speak louder than words. We've all heard this, right? Well, it is so true. As moms, especially most of the people that I'm speaking to are moms, and as a mom myself, the kitchen is kind of our domain. For a lot of us, we're in charge of not only nourishing the family through what we prepare, but nourishing our children, their souls and their education and their hands and their training, so that they will grow up maybe knowing better the things that we didn't know growing up. But we have this legacy we're building in our children. So in our domain of our kitchen, and obviously this can extend farther into our lives, we want to be a person not just speaking words to them like don't do that, but we want to be a person who's leading with our actions and teaching them with our actions how to behave, how to handle kitchen challenges, how to go after something when you really want to learn it. Our children are paying attention. If we're talking about how, someday I'd really learn to make kombucha, and we just say that for years and years and never do it, they see that. However, if we say, I really like to learn to make kombucha, and they see us at the computer watching videos, hopefully traditional cooking school videos, and just absorbing all this information, then going in the kitchen and then calling one of them, hey, you want to try this with me? That's what I'm talking about. Kind of inspiring them through our own actions. And that's a positive example, but there's negative examples as well, like how you handle weird foods or how you handle kitchen setbacks. We all have children who are in the kitchen or more. Like I can think of one example that wasn't in the kitchen, but it totally relates, is one of our daughters. One of the things that I grew up knowing, my mom taught me when I was 7 years old how to sew on a sewing machine, and I've been a sewer my whole life. And so when our daughters were young, they saw me sewing and they were very interested. And they saved up their money, and by the time they were, I can't remember their ages, but both daughters saved up more than $100 each from birthday and all that, because they saw that I loved sewing and they decided they wanted to sew too, and they wanted their own sewing machines. So they each paid for their own sewing machine through their hard-earned money as a child, and we didn't do allowances or anything like that. So it's birthday money and odds and ends of money for years. So they saved up, and maybe they were 10, 11, 12, something like that, and they each bought a sewing machine. Anyway, cool. Comments coming in, I'm sewing while listening. I love that. I wish I could be sewing while I'm talking. This morning, my husband handed me a shirt to mend, and he said, can you fix this, or does it just need to be cut up? And I said, I can fix that. I just can't do it right now. So tomorrow. So I have this little mending project tomorrow. Anyway, so they bought their sewing machines, and it was fun, and we learned to sew. But here's what happened. One of my daughters in particular is very particular, and she likes things to line up. And she's just a very, type A, you would call it. And sewing is so frustrating to her. And it was really, really frustrating then, because fabric stretches or thread breaks or the needle gets dull or it gets, caught up. I mean, if you sew, that things happen. And so she would just be in tears over and over and over again. Well, that's one of those things that we see in our children. We have to help them through that. But are we doing something like that ourselves and not realizing that we're setting that kind of example for them? Like if you have a kitchen setback or a sewing setback, are you handling it with, bursts of anger and, swearing and being annoyed? Or, I said swearing. I don't know if women tend to do it that way. Maybe men tend to burst out that way more than women do. But whatever the hang up is, how are you handling those setbacks, and how are your actions teaching your children? Like we can tell them, don't get upset about that, that's okay, but what if it happens to us? Do we get fly off the handle upset? In that situation, we're telling them one thing and we're doing another. So these kind of things that we want to teach our children, especially in the domain of the kitchen, is going to extend into their whole life. But in the place where we are the most, we want to set the tone and set the example with our actions as well as our words. So other quick examples I jotted down. Are you willing to try new foods? How do you handle foods you don't like? What if you go out somewhere, like to a potluck or somebody's house, and they don't serve the kind of food that you prefer to eat? Or you hop in your vehicle with the family drive home and then just start complaining about how bad it was? And I'm not pointing the finger at anybody here. These are just the things that occurred to me that I've seen people do, and even in our family we've done sometimes. That it's when you look back and you see, how the poor choices you made, how to handle things, it's very convicting. So that one example of how do you handle people's hospitalities, even if they don't know how you eat, we've got to just overflow with thanksgiving and not focus on the negative for the sake of the children are listening to us. So I think that's all I have to say about that. That was kitchen rule number 6. Actions speak louder than words. And I see the hearts are flowing. Thank you so much for that feedback you all are sharing. Moving on to kitchen rules number 7. First, about number 6. So Spring Spinner says she learned how to eat things she hates without making a face growing up. So that must have been something your parents instilled in you. Learn to eat something new and don't make a face about it. And that's the action of how you handle that thing. Maybe you hated it. Maybe it finally grew on you, but try it without making a face. And as parents, we probably ought to do that for our children. Try things without making a face. Okay, so kitchen rule number 7. This is very related to number 6, probably just a slight nuance. And as I'm going through these kitchen rules, the things that are striking me are kind of these phrases that just hit me. And, they might be a Proverbs or a common quote or a common saying, but they really apply in the kitchen. So there's going to be some overlap. But I feel like it's beneficial just to draw out each one and see how it relates to the kitchen. So number 7 is people listen to experts, but they follow leaders. And I did not make this up. I heard this like in business or something. So here's the thing. We love traditional cooking. Everybody who's listening here has some kind of reason for loving traditional cooking. It might be it just is a way for you to connect with God. It could be it's transformed your health. It could be because you have hope of what it's going to do for your family and your health or yourself. So we have these agendas. We have a passion. And there are people in our lives who are not interested. And we can nag, we can ply them with information, data, and facts. We can talk about it constantly up and down, and all we're going to do is be a nag and an annoyance to them. That's why this is what I think of when I think of this quote. People listen to experts, they follow leaders. We don't want to be just the expert that's spouting off things and being an annoyance. We actually want to lead. Now, leaders do know the facts, but they're discerning and they're wise, and they rely a lot on spiritual guidance for knowing what to do and how to proceed. So if there are people in your life that you want to win over, you have to be a leader about it, not merely an expert. They're not going to follow you if you're just a fact-spouting nag. They're going to follow you if you're truly leading. So this means, and a lot of this in situations I've faced, really comes down to prayer and asking for guidance. I need help making good decisions. And God is the one who leads me through that. So if you're not like a person who just, can just tell the right thing to do, which, I think there's people that are better at discernment than others, but in every situation, we all can benefit on God. But what this means, being a leader, is discerning what battles you should fight. There's probably some battles that you just simply should let go and not fight. It means to pray. It means to ask God for his wisdom on how to proceed. It means sometimes maybe just keeping your mouth shut and just carrying on with your own actions, what you can control about yourself. You can't force others, and leaders know this. True leaders know that, good leaders know. And in our families, I'm not saying that we as moms should be the leader of the family. I'm saying that the kitchen is our place, and if we're the one who's passionate about changing our family's lives through the foods that we eat and prepare and serve, that we are the leader in that, if you want to call it being a leader. So be a strong leader, a discerning leader, and know that as a leader, you're welcome. I'm getting a thanks for the inspiration in the comments. Know that as a leader, that not everyone's going to follow with you, and know that as a leader, you should know that everybody needs to make their own choice, and that you can't be a nag about it. You need to be positive and discerning, like I talked before. So sometimes that means like if it's another adult, obviously, you cannot decide for them. You cannot force them. You just want to be a good example, be positive, be cheerful, rely on the Lord for when to say something, when not to say things. Sometimes there's a lot of power in keeping our mouths shut. Another common technique is, instead of push with facts and data and I think you should and you should be doing this, is ask questions, leading questions, because that's opens a discussion and a dialogue, and just be open-minded and be listening to what's coming back to you on the other side. Now with our children, it's different because we have certain expectations, and they're in our home, and every family has these are the rules. So some of these things may be non-negotiable. Like there's certain expectations, and they don't really have a choice. I mean, they're going to do it. The choice they need to make is like, the attitude inside, and you really can't control the attitude. So in this situation, the way that we can be a leader, like if we're expecting them to take a certain so many bites of food, or if we're expecting them to eat what's served or go hungry, or if we expect them to help without complaining or help without whining, those are expectations we can expect of our children for the healthy family dynamic and all that. So as a leader, as a mom in this situation, a strong mom in this situation, we need to do our best not to whine or cajole or what's the word? We don't want to like turn it into, put downs and saying negative things about the children. It's mostly just like, this is what you're going to do, and these are the consequences if you don't. So not turning it into put downs or humiliation or whining or begging them. That's not leadership. Leadership is setting the expectation and the consequences if they're not, followed. So those are my thoughts on the kind of two situations, the grown-up adult that you cannot force, and the child that you cannot force like what's in their heart, but you can enforce the actions because there's a certain standard of behavior that's required in your family. And that's a very black and white kind of blanket way to handle it. Obviously there are issues in every family, extenuating circumstances, differences, so just take it with a grain of salt, apply it to your family. And I want to close this point just by bringing it back to ourselves, because this isn't just a rule that like, everyone else we're strong and perfect and we need to lead in this situation because we know everything or we've got it all figured out. But that's not true, because we ourselves have hang-ups. I know myself, there are certain things that, my husband told me years ago that I resisted, and it took me a long time to come around, and he, as a strong leader, didn't force me. We talked about it, and he just gave me time, and I finally came around. And that's sort of a characteristic of our relationship, is in many situations, Wardee is the last one to come around. And my husband is being the good leader in that, in keeping the discussion open, but allowing me to make my own choice or to come around when I finally will. So I have hang-ups. And maybe there's another hang-up where there's nobody in your life telling it to you, but there's something you should be doing with your health. There's something, emotionally that gets you hung up. So the point is, you've been in a situation yourself where you have a hang up and you have a choice to do the right thing, whether or not somebody else is expecting of you or telling it to you. So realize that is what's happening in the people around you, that you're trying to inject them with your passion and get them on, on the same agenda as you. Well, they're not on the same agenda as you. And you know how that feels yourself, because you've had people in your life and you're not on their agenda. You know what I'm trying to say here is, have compassion for that person who's going through that, because you've been there yourself. And the right way to handle it is to be a leader, not just an expert, spouting off and nagging and whining and all that. Okay? So I think that's it about number 7. Rule number 7, people listen to experts, they follow leaders. Does anyone have anything to say about that before I move on to number 8? And I need to move more quickly here. All right, so number 8, your chain is only as strong as your weakest link. You guys have heard that, right? Well, this is both in our personality, our business, our relationships, and our kitchen and our life and our functionality. Okay, so if you just get very practical about the kitchen, if your kitchen's chaotic or you're falling behind, or it's just really hard to get done the things that you ideally would like to get done, you got to just take a good hard look at the kitchen. Where are things getting hung up? Maybe it is, nobody's keeping up with the dishes. It's as simple as that. Well, your kitchen life and what you're serving and preparing is only going to be as good, as strong as the weakest link. And so if the dishes are piling up, that's going to affect the productivity and what you're able to produce out of the kitchen. So in that situation, the weakest link is the dishes piling up. That's just an example. Maybe it's discipline around eating sweets or eating out or having boxed foods, or maybe you're trying to do everything yourself and you're not taking the time to teach your children how to help you, so that it's all on your shoulders, and then you're sick or you're ill or you have no energy or whatever, and so it's not getting done. So what's the weakest link in that situation? that I just said, the weakest link is getting the children involved so it's not all on your plate, because you only have limited time and resources. So if I run into this in life or in the kitchen, what I usually do if there's a problem somewhere is just make a list. By the way, this is called the theory of constraints, I believe, and it applies in all areas of life, but you can really do it like in the kitchen or a relationship or a work situation. But if it's just not working right, you make a list of all the problems. Just make a list of all the problems. I just said a bunch. So you make a list of all of them, and then with each one you ask why. Well, why is that happening? Why is that a problem? Why is that a problem? So you make your list and you draw a line with the why. So the dishes are backing up because we're using, everybody's using 5 utensils instead of one, and nobody's assigned to dish duty. So you're saying some whys. On each one of these problems, you're saying whys. And so you have a list of whys, and you might need to ask why again and again and again, because there could be a root cause behind a root cause behind a root cause. Not that they're all root causes, but you just keep going deeper. And if you go deeper and deeper, and your list is kind of contained to one aspect of your life, like the kitchen or your work situation or your relationship or your spiritual life or your fitness, if you confine all the problems to that one sphere and you ask why on each of them, and you keep asking why and you keep asking why, you normally end up with like 1 or 2 things that need to be fixed. And that's called the root cause. And that's the weakest link. So instead of focusing on all these other little things that can get you overwhelming, and it's like, I can't fix like 15 million things at once, you're actually only fixing 1 or 2 things, because they are the root cause of everything else. Another thing it could be is in your health. And we've heard this, you've heard this at traditional cooking school, you've heard it from me, but our health is in the gut, right? There's so many diseases out there that if you heal the gut, they're healed. And yet so much of pharmaceuticals and supplements and these things we do, we're just trying to do a band-aid solution to all these like symptoms and diseases, where if we focused on healing the gut, that's where the true solution is. Does that make sense? The gut is the weakest link there. You can only be as healthy as your gut is healthy. And your kitchen can only be as productive as the least productive place in the kitchen, which maybe is, you're making concessions too often, or you're too busy so you don't have time to cook, or the dishes are getting backed up so you don't have time to cook because you're always doing dishes, or everybody's using too many plates and utensils. There's so many dishes that you don't have what you need when you need to cook. So just go through that exercise with any area of your life, but especially we're talking in the kitchen. Figure out what all the problems are and ask why. Just keep asking why until you get to the root cause. And then you fix that. You work on fixing that. So that was number 8. Kitchen rule number 8. The chain is only as strong as the weakest link. Kitchen rule number 9. I'm going to have to pick up the pace here, because in about 20 minutes we have new member orientation at Traditional Cooking School. So if you're a new member, you got an email today with a link, and please join me there. Number 9, there are no bad questions, only bad answers. This really has to do with our children, maybe even our spouses too, because we're the queen of the kitchen, right? It's our domain. We've talked about that. We're responsible for the kitchen, give or take. I know there's different family situations. So the spouse and the children, they're part of our life, so therefore they're part of the kitchen. So be welcoming to them. If the children are asking questions, and I know it can get annoying when they're toddlers, when they're asking, what's that, or why, or who's that, it's just over and over and over. Well, we want the kitchen to be a place where they know that we have patience, that we have energy, that we want to explain things to them, we want to infuse them with our passion. We don't want to laugh at them and make them feel stupid. We don't want it to be humiliating. We want to foster this and culture this beautiful relationship that happens in the kitchen. That's where we spend our time. And in last week's episode, one of the commenters said she's always alone in the kitchen, and that's so sad. And none of us want to be alone. Well, maybe somebody does want to be alone in the kitchen, but the commenter didn't want to be alone in the kitchen. I don't want to be alone in the kitchen. And sometimes that starts with when the people are making an effort, do you turn them away with like, I don't have time for that, or that's a stupid question, or don't you know the answer to that? I mean, sometimes these things just come out of us, but we need to stop and think and act the other way, to be encouraging and loving and energetic and patient. There are so many things that could not get done that'd be okay, but keeping our relationships healthy, that's not okay. Let the other things go and keep the relationships healthy, just for the sake of loving the people in your family. And I'm not like pointing names or pointing fingers here. This is very general talk, and I just see this, and I see it in myself, and I see it in family members. I think we all should just be more patient and more loving and kind, and there are no bad questions, only bad answers. In other words, your answer is your responsibility. Don't deflect that onto the other person and make them feel stupid or you don't have time for them. Make the kitchen a place of joy and fun. Not just a place where food is cooked, but where relationships are strengthened. Relationships with your children, relationships with your spouse. All right. And number 10, it's related. A soft answer turns away wrath. This is one of my favorite Proverbs. As the moms, and we're doing a lot of the cooking and sourcing of ingredients and all that, we have bad experiences. So we might have a bad experience at a store, we might have a bad experience with a local farm, we might have a bad experience with a family member because we're trying to accomplish something and they're getting in their way, or they have a bad attitude. So many things can go wrong. So all these negative experiences, from a person in our family being ungrateful to somebody double crossing us when we're making this transaction. I'm not saying put up with wrong actions, but what I'm saying is take the high road and don't let your reactions escalate the problem and turn it into a bigger thing than it needs to be. We want to cultivate patience, thanksgiving, love, even when dealing with wrong actions, so that nothing escalates beyond where it should be. The Bible, God is so true when he says a soft answer turns away wrath. I know that you've seen it in your life so many times. I have, over and over, and I tried it, and our kids are, grown now, but when they were younger, that was one of the things that my husband and I taught them a lot, which is, if you're fighting, the fight only continues until somebody stops it. But if you just keep pushing back, it's just going to keep going. But if you stop and do something kind, as much as a hug or listening or, oh, you're right, I'm sorry, that is a soft answer that completely deflates the problem. And this is part of the kitchen. I mean, it is part of life, but it's part of the kitchen too, because you might have kids bickering in the kitchen. That's another example. You might have family members that are ungrateful. And then, of course, I mentioned before, just sourcing foods, you might have a bad experience. So just be wise. Be wise about how far you pursue grievances, for the sake of doing the right thing and, cultivating and being a good example. So that was number 10. A soft answer turns away wrath. What do you guys think? You have anything to add to any of those? Thank you for the comment. She's saying, thank you so much for your wise words. I truly appreciate them. Well, you're welcome. I appreciate that. I don't feel wise. I feel blessed. And relationships are very important to me. It's part of my personality. So these kind of things bother me when I see them in myself or others. So it's just sort of something that's always on my heart. You're welcome. And Spring Spinner's giving a thumbs up. Being Happy First says, you are always an example to your children. Yes, you are always an example to your children. I mean, it's such a great responsibility when you think of it. Prairie Gentian says that this is so encouraging to me. I'm glad to hear it. God bless you. I'm glad you're encouraged. It's encouraging to me too. I've been preaching to myself here. Okay. Well, I appreciate you all being here. And just a quick wrap up. If you're listening live, thank you again for being with me. And if you want to get in on the fun live, you would just follow periscope.tv/tradcookschool or @tradcookschool on the Periscope app and watch sometime on Thursdays, because that's when I hop on here to pre-record or to do a live recording of Know Your Food with Wardee. If you're listening to this later and you're listening to the audio version on iTunes, please know that there is a video replay at the show notes, knowyourfoodpodcast.com/151. If that interests you, you can see my sticky notes. And of course, the show notes do have more than the video replay. They also have just written out these kitchen rules and a few sentences about each one. And I didn't really mention any links, but normally our show notes have links in them. All right, well, thank you so much for being with me. God bless you all. I'll talk to you again in a week, and if you can join me again next Thursday, really look forward to it. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you'll come back again soon. Here's what you can do next. You can visit the show notes for this episode to get links and more resources about today's topic. Just visit knowyourfoodpodcast.com/ and then without a space, type in the number of today's episode. You can stop by knowyourfoodpodcast.com/watch to get 5 free traditional cooking videos from me. It's a gift. And finally, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, the podcast app, or Stitcher. If you're on a mobile device, just search for Know Your Food with Wardee right in the app. If you're on a desktop or laptop, just go to knowyourfoodpodcast.com/iTunes right in your browser. And while you're there, please leave a rating or review. I love to get your comments, and your feedback makes it much more likely that others who are interested in traditional cooking will find my podcast too. Thanks so much. God bless you, and I'll see you again soon.